Okay, morning everybody. Welcome to our first virtual executive meeting. Item 1 is attendances, and I've received apologies from Councillor Wright. There may be other members joining the call as we go through, but I think we'll manage that just as they come onto the call. At the outset, just conscious that we are using the technology for the first time, if I can ask all members for clarity of audio to make sure that they are muted if they are not speaking, that would be fantastic. I think the other thing, just to remind you, obviously, is because we are webcasting, to the use of the microphone button would be beneficial for personal reasons as well. You wouldn't want to be overheard. So item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in any items on the agenda? I will take silence as an admission that there are none. Okay, that's great. Item 3 is the cheery matter of the financial implications of COVID-19. Could I ask Councillor Ross, as Exec Member for Finance and Investment, to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Leader. I hope everyone can hear me this morning. I'm just going to take you through this report that's been submitted to the to MHCLG on the 15th of April. We were asked to provide financial indications as to how our budget will be impacted by the COVID situation. And it follows on from some of the words that I had said at the previous executive meeting in March. It's clear at this stage that there'll be a significant impact of around £37 million during this year's budget. The reasoning behind that figure is that we will expect to see increased pressures on our demand-led budgets. We'll expect to see a fall in income, including our traded services income. We expect to see a fall in our collection rates of approximately 5% for our council tax, and also a fall in our collection of non-retail business rates. There is also an impact on the likelihood of us meeting our savings targets. And I'd like to remind everyone at the same time of our position about our reserves, which have historically been low compared with other local authorities. As part of this exercise, we've also looked at reprogramming and reprioritising the capital programme just to resolve any cash flow issues we may have. The report also refers to support that we've received from the government so far. The extended retail relief scheme and the business grants are covered by direct Section 31 grants from the government, and by way of an update and an aside on the business grants, as of yesterday, 2,594 businesses had been paid out, which is approximately £30 million worth of grants, and 67% of those eligible for the support. Obviously, we're working hard to make sure that those businesses get the grants that they need. We've received 1.5 million as a hardship fund, and we've also received 6.1 million from an initial 1.6 billion allocated to support care for more vulnerable people. You may have seen last weekend that the government announced a further 1.6 billion. We've not yet got an understanding of what our allocation within that will be, but we will of course keep members updated once we do. This leaves an estimated in-year gap of £25 million, and I'll just stress that that is an estimate. We could face further pressures, and looking ahead to future years, we're looking at least a £20 million gap for the 21-22 budget as things stand. Clearly, that is a big financial impact on the council. We will continue to lobby government to provide the support that we need. I must stress that we are not the only local authority in this situation. Local authorities across the country have all been submitting this data to MHCLG. It is a clear pressure point that we are hoping that the government will address as soon as possible. But I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I'm not aware that we have any questions or comments from members of the executive, but if there are any questions or comments from members of the executive, could they come in on their mics now, please? I will take silence as there being no questions. That's great. Okay, the way that I intend to handle the questions, actually, because of the nature of the reports, unusually, is I'm going to invite Councillor Myers to come in first, should wish to, as Shadow Exec Member for Finance, after which I'll take each of the group leaders in turn. So, Councillor Myers, would you like to ask any questions or comments at all?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Can I ask Tom, perhaps, or Nikki, if she's still there, about the Section 31 money? Has the money actually been received? And then what happens if the money that we have received through the Section 31 grants isn't sufficient to cover our needs? And alternatively, does the money have to be paid back if there's if we don't get the other 35 or 36% of people who are eligible to make that claim? So that's one question. I don't know if you want to handle that first, Tom.
Thank you. We certainly received the business grant money at the start of the month, but I will defer to Nikki because you've asked some very good questions there, and I'm sure Nikki will be happy to respond to the rest of them.
Yes, so checking that, yes, I'm live now. So on the business rates Section 31 grants, in fact, all the Section 31 grants, the government have been really good in terms of cash flow, and they have paid everything up front. They've also paid other funding streams that we would normally be expecting. They've paid those up front to aid our cash flow, which has made a huge difference to the cash flow of all local authorities. So that's something that we are very grateful for. In terms of the business rates grants, particularly, the allocation that they gave us was an estimate because of the nature of the businesses. They estimated how much we would need for our business rates base, and they did that to everybody. And then it's for us to work out which of our businesses are eligible and to pay those businesses. The difference, whether it be higher or lower, we will either pay back or claim at the end. So once we've got through all of these, there will be a reconciliation at the end, and we will either give it back or claim some more. But it will have a net nil effect on the council.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I ask a second question then about the estimate for the NDR in particular? I think you've mentioned 5% for non-retail businesses. What about other businesses that aren't involved in the retail sector but might get into trouble? What allowance have we made for those in particular? Because I see that in total the income pressure is some £37 million, which is a huge amount, and a slight slip there would mean a big difference to council funding.
Yes, so we have estimated that the retail and leisure that are now subject to Section 31 grant. So we've actually received all the money for those retail and leisure businesses who now won't be eligible, won't have to pay business rates this year. So the 5% we've estimated is a fall against our normal collection rate for the remaining businesses that aren't covered by that Section 31. So we're sort of anticipating, but we don't yet know, we're anticipating how many businesses may have difficulty in paying us this year that would normally be able to pay us, and that's our guess. We are doing work across the other treasurers groups to see how our assumptions align with other people's, but that work is just starting at the moment.
And then finally, can I just ask about what actions we're actually taking to get people who haven't made a claim yet or haven't had their claim processed yet? What actions are we taking to ensure that that we get 100% take up? Thank you.
Shall I answer that, Tom?
If you're happy to, yes, I can.
Yes, yeah. I know that Tom's been very involved in this, so he would have been able to answer this one. We have our business growth team, who are the team in the council who are closest to businesses. they are being given a list of all the businesses who we think are eligible that haven't yet claimed, because we don't hold contact details for a lot of these very small businesses, because actually under normal circumstances, a lot of them don't pay us business rates. So we don't have email addresses and we don't have telephone numbers. So they are doing their best to trace these businesses to try to get in contact with them. We have sent a letter to every address that we think is eligible, but of course a lot of the premises are currently empty. So there's probably a lot of envelopes lying in businesses that haven't been visited recently. So we are doing what we can, but all local authorities have found that there are a sort of a group that are quite hard to reach. So getting to the last bit to reach 100%, I think it is probably going to be fairly slow.
I'll just add in there. I mean, certainly that a lot of work has gone into making sure we get up to the 67% figure that we're currently at, but we are keen to get that support out to everyone that is eligible to it. So if councillors out there are aware of businesses or come across people, please do let us know, let the business rates team, or pass them on to our microsite on the website itself, which has got some fantastic advice and links into how to make claims for that grant. I think we're all quite conscious that behind every business there is an individual, there is a family, and this is a way of getting them some support. So yeah, I would encourage your councillors to, if you come across a business, please direct them to the website. There's lots of helpful advice there, and also advice on how to apply for the grant.
Thanks, Tom and Nikki. Thanks, Councillor Myers, for your questions. Councillor Evans, any questions or comments from you at all?
Just really, I finally commend the accounts team for getting to a faltering start on those grants, but actually they've got the stuff together. Great. I wouldn't normally mention names, but Louise Shaw has been a fantastic over the past week, and I think we're at a good position now. I'm quite vocal of my criticism, so I think he's quite vocal of my confidence. I think we've got to a relatively comfortable. We've just got to find those businesses now, which we're all working on.
Thanks, Councillor Evans, and echo that praise, particularly for Louise, but all of the team and also the staff that have been voluntarily redeployed into has trebled in size. So just then turning to Councillor Brophy, please, any questions or comments?
Just to echo the comment that the team who've done the business grants seem to have been very efficient and got that together, as well as could be got together. I just wanted to ask a question about the financial report and the gaps. I think it was said that there's a 25 million gap for 2021 and 20 million projected for 21-22. Is that right?
Yes.
So in terms of how that gap's going to be met, because obviously it was unplanned, couple of questions on that. You've got the money for the vulnerable people, and I'm guessing that that's going to cover what services we do deliver. Are there any implications for staff of the council for that? Are staffing levels going to be maintained, or will there have to be issues for that? Obviously, you might not know these things yet. Councillor Ross also indicated that there was other councils in the same situation. Is it possible to give us some idea as to how bad things are in Trafford related to other councils, or is it pretty much the same across the board, or is Trafford in a better position or a worse position than other comparable councils? Thank you.
Okay, in terms of the decisions as a result of the shortfall that we aren't at that stage yet. This report is very much an indicative figure as to what we expect our current shortfall to be, and that is before we anticipate any further support that we may get and we hope to get from the government. So we're not at that stage yet where we can start looking at decisions and start looking at ways that we change the budget for this year as a result of the in-year shortfall. Local authorities have been affected in various degrees. MHCLG would have the ministry will have that kind of data. I'm pretty sure that will be available data. over the coming days, the coming weeks, as more and more councils say what their current financial situation is. And if Nikki has anything to add, I'm sure she'd be happy to come in now.
Yeah, so just coming in on that point, can you hear me properly? Yeah. Okay, so just coming in on that point, there has been some work done across GM to make comparisons of our returns, and we are continuing with that work. Most of us have put in sort of roughly the same sort of levels. We're also doing comparisons across the Metropolitan Treasurers Group to look at what assumptions are being made. This first return we had to do very quickly, so we didn't have a chance to sense check our assumptions with each other. So we're kind of now doing that in retrospect. But actually, we seem to have all made fairly similar assumptions and are looking at similar levels of shortfalls. Some councils have particular income streams that have fallen away very quickly and are worse affected than others, and that is part of the local nature of local government. And I think it's fair to say that district councils have actually they've seen their cash balances go down the fastest, and those very small councils are probably the most at risk in this immediate period.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki and Tom. Thanks, Jane. Councillor Coggins, any questions from yourself?
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I wanted to as well thank those who've written this report. I realise it must be extremely difficult given the uncertainty we have, and with everyone learning to work from home and so on. And I welcome the benchmarking that's mentioned in paragraph 15, which will give us a lot more clarity, I think, on the financial challenge that we face. I had a few questions. At paragraph 6, we are told that on page 3, about 641,000 of the tranche 1 funding we've received from government has been used not for social care purposes. I was wondering, was that figure decided locally, or is that part of the criteria that have come from government? And if we could have some indication as to where that money did go.
Okay, so Tom, is it okay if I answer this one?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of that, when we first got the first allocation, we were told that the 1.6 billion had been allocated, the majority according to the social care funding criteria, and a small amount according to the general level that they normally allocate funding, because there are sort of several formulas they use. So we locally decided that actually had intended a certain amount of it to be used for social care, and so we badged that amount against social care, and running the calculation that left 641,000 to be applied against all our other income losses, basically. So we applied that to our income losses, and it was, as you can see, very, very quickly swallowed up. The allocation of the next 1.6 million, which was announced last weekend, and for which we are all very grateful, has not yet been decided, and I suspect it will be more towards the general level, although I say that there's been no decisions has been made that I'm party to, but the reason I'm thinking it's going to be more towards that way is because the districts got very little, because they don't have social care. So in the first set, the districts got very, very little amount of money, and I expect the government will want to make sure that they get sufficient funding. So I would expect that we will get less than 1.6 million out of the next, our share of the next 1.6 billion, but that remains to be seen.
Geraldine, do you want to take yourself off mute? Sorry. Carry on, by all means.
Sorry, I knew I'd do it. Briefly, on page 7 in the annex, both children's and adult social care staffing costs are listed as extra pressures that we can expect over the course of the year. I'm wondering, are we going to need extra staff in those areas, or are we going to be expecting our current staff to work longer hours? If we require more staff, is that something that we've started to look to recruit now? And is there going to be a lot of pressure in the market in that area? Thanks.
Okay, if I just start with that one, I understand that is relating to agency staff contingency. Is it just in case we have sickness? Is that right, Nikki? Oh.
Yes, that's right. We are seeing agency staffing pressures as people have to self-isolate or are sick. So that's the majority of what that is.
Okay, thank you. If I can briefly, just 2 more questions. We've loaned Trafford Leisure 480,000 in the annex, page 7, and I see that there a further 1.6 is projected over the course of the year. And now I'm aware that we're planning to write a new leisure strategy and so on. I'm just wondering, what is the likelihood of us getting that sort of money back? Are these really loans, or are they closer to grants?
They are loans, but we obviously need to look at the leisure strategy and take that into account once the initial crisis around the COVID situation settles down. But yeah, they are very much loans, and we are expecting the money back as a council.
One last question, if that's all right, just again on the annex of page 9, there's an estimated 35,000 impact from the suspension of car parking charges. And I was wondering if we could have some detail on what parking charges have been suspended and why. Thanks.
Okay, well, my presumption is that Nikki can clarify this, but we lifted some of the restrictions obviously for NHS staff and some of our care staff, but also this, I don't know if this ties in, but some of the relaxations we've had on residential parking schemes as well. But I'm sure Nikki can clarify if I've got anything not quite correct.
Yeah, I think there are 2 things on the same page that relate to car parking. First, there's the staff car parking. We normally get income from the staff for their parking spaces, and obviously since most of them are working from home at the moment, we aren't really able to take staff car parking charges. The other one is the suspension of car parking charges, which I think is around our town centres. And I don't know if Richard Rowe is on this call, in which case he would be able to answer that better than me, but I can find out the detail for you, Councillor Coggins, and come back to you on that one.
Great, thanks very much.
Thanks, Nikki and Tom. Thanks, Councillor Coggins. So this report is just for noting. Clearly, it is a long road ahead, and indeed quite an up and down one. So it's difficult to predict with absolute certainty the way that the financial position will unfold. But we are clearly going to need to maintain pressure on the government. I did write to the Prime Minister last week around the funding issues to ask him to make good on the promise to ensure that we are fully compensated, because clearly this will have an enormous financial impact, not only this year, but actually next year and probably for at least a decade thereafter also. So very, very grateful to Councillor Ross and to the officers involved in producing that report, for bringing that to us today. The report is just for noting, and therefore I will just assume that silence from the executive is that the report can be noted, if that's okay. Great, I will take that as noted. So item 4 is urgent business, which does allow for anything that I consider worthy of note as special circumstances. And there are just a couple of things that I would like to mention. We'll take the sad news first, which is that colleagues will have been aware of the recent passing of Councillor Sue Murphy, the Deputy Leader of Manchester City Council, clearly a neighbouring borough of ours, and Sue was a significant figure in Greater Manchester politics, having been Deputy Leader for 10 years and also very involved with the local government association in addition to the sterling work that she did in Manchester. And I'm sure that all colleagues would want me just to recognise Sue's contribution and to say that the thoughts of all of us within Trafford, councillors and staff, are with her family at the moment, particularly given that due to the sad circumstances at the moment, people were not able to attend the funeral in large numbers. In slightly cheerier news, members will also be aware that Tony Lloyd, former Deputy Leader of Trafford Labour Group, former MP for Stretford and former Police and Crime Commissioner for Greater Manchester and Interim Mayor of Greater Manchester, current MP for Rochdale, some CV there, has recently been in hospital suffering from coronavirus. Pleased to say, as I'm sure members will have heard, that he is now out of intensive care and appears to be making a really good recovery. So just wanted to note both of those things. But item 5 on the agenda is the exclusion resolution, enabling us to move into part 2 of this meeting. And as we are broadcasting virtually, I will read it for clarity. So the exclusion resolution reads that the public be excluded from this meeting during consideration of the remaining items on the agenda because of the likelihood of disclosure of exempt information which falls within one or more descriptive category or categories of the Local Government Act 1972, Schedule 12A, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order of 2006, and specified on the agenda item or report relating to each such item respectively. Again, I will take silence from the executive as assent to that. Thank you. So the resolution is agreed. Could we just take a slight pause, please, to switch the broadcast off, and if somebody could notify me when we are no longer recording so that we can proceed, please.